In the heart of a vibrant Latin American city, where the rhythm of salsa and the aroma of street food once filled the air, a shadow fell. It all started in a place of celebration, a club named DL. The Heart. Two men, leaders of their respective neighborhoods, clashed over a misunderstanding, a spilled drink, a word spoken in haste. What began as a trivial argument, fueled by pride and a long history of simmering rivalry, spiraled into a wildfire of conflict. The initial spark in the club ignited a communal war that consumed the entire city. The streets, once alive with music and laughter, became silent, punctuated only by the heavy tramp of soldiers' boots. These weren't foreign invaders. They were their own sons, brothers, and neighbors, now divided by invisible lines drawn in anger. Well equipped and clad in uniforms, they patrolled the once familiar alleyways and plazas. Checkpoints sprang up at every corner, turning a city of friends into a network of guarded territories. The demand for peace was on everyone's lips, a desperate prayer whispered in the quiet of their homes, but it felt like an impossible dream, a target too distant to reach. The trust that had bound them together for generations had shattered into a million pieces. Families were torn apart. A mother in the north couldn't visit her daughter. In the south, old friends who had grown up playing football in the same dusty streets now saw each other as enemies. The economy faltered as businesses closed, unable to operate in the constant state of tension. Children learned the geography of their city not by landmarks but by no-go zones. The soldiers, young men with hardened faces, stood guard day and night. They held their weapons tight, their eyes scanning for threats, but behind the tough exterior you could see the weariness, the sadness of a generation forced into a war they never wanted. This wasn't a war of nations, but a war of brothers, and that made it all the more devastating. The leaders who started it all, holed up in their respective strongholds, issued commands and fueled the flames with propaganda. They spoke of honor and territory, but the people only knew loss and fear. Peace talks were attempted, mediated by elders and community figures, but they always broke down. The wounds were too deep, the pride too stubborn. Each side demanded justice for perceived wrongs, creating a cycle of retaliation that seemed unbreakable. The city was bleeding and no one seemed to have the cure. Then something shifted. It wasn't a grand treaty or a dramatic surrender. It started with a small act, almost unnoticed. A young soldier from one side saw an elderly woman from the enemy neighborhood struggle to carry her groceries. For a moment he didn't see a rival. He saw his own grandmother. He put down his rifle, crossed the invisible line, and helped her carry her bags to her door. His comrades watched, stunned. The woman, initially terrified, looked at him with tears in her eyes and thanked him. This single act of kindness, a flicker of humanity in the darkness, was witnessed by people on both sides. The story spread like a gentle breeze, a whisper of what one soldier had done. It planted a seed of doubt in the hearts of others. Why were they fighting? For what? The next day, another soldier shared his water with a child from across the checkpoint. Then, a group of women from both sides met secretly at the river, not to fight, but to wash their clothes together as they had always done, sharing stories and quiet support. These small acts began to unravel the fabric of hatred that had been woven so tightly around them. The soldiers started talking to each other, first in hushed tones, then more openly. They remembered playing together as kids, of shared festivals and family ties. They realized they were more alike than different. The weapons began to feel heavier, not with their physical weight, but with the weight of the pointless division they represented. The leaders, sensing the shift in their own ranks, found their authority waning. The power wasn't in their guns anymore. It was in the hands of the people who were choosing connection over conflict. The turning point came during the annual Festival of the Sun, a tradition that had been cancelled since the war began. Defying orders, the people from both neighborhoods decided to celebrate it. They gathered in the main plaza, the very no man's land that had separated them. Soldiers, one by one, laid down their arms and joined the crowd. They took off their helmets and uniforms, revealing not soldiers but sons, fathers, and friends. The two men whose argument had started it all found themselves face to face in the crowd. There were no words, only a long, hard look, filled with regret and the shared pain of what they had caused, in a moment that would become legend. They embraced. A deep, heartfelt hug that acknowledged the needless suffering and the long road back. That single act of forgiveness broke the dam. The entire plaza erupted, not in cheers, but in a collective sigh of relief, of tears and hugs. Strangers and enemies embraced, asking for forgiveness, offering it freely. They were no longer two warring factions. They were one community again. The soldiers who had stood as guards now stood as brothers, their arms around each other's shoulders. The right thing had finally been done. It wasn't a military victory or a political negotiation. It was the simple, profound realization that their shared humanity was stronger than any division. The city was reborn, not just in the absence of war, but in the rediscovery of its own heart. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to follow for more stories that move us.